All right. I think I just pressed record. You probably will get the message too.
Mm.
All right, great.
Well, I think we're all here. Welcome, everybody. I don't know if Lauren's joining us today or not. I haven't heard whether he is, but I'm sure he's probably busy with other things, with patients perhaps. So we'll just go ahead and get started. First up, we're going to talk about training. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and let her do her magic.
All right. And I think this question stemmed from the last board meeting. And then Kiara, you followed up about it just really briefly with me about training for suicide awareness and prevention. And I think you had asked if we could have a conversation about what kind of training we provide for our staff. And so I've invited Nicole Hatch here. Nicole was a school counselor last year at Thomaston Grammar School. And this year she is the student support coordinator at Oceanside High School. And Nicole has quite the background in her clinical work and her work with, I think, Nicole, you've worked with the state on a couple of programs as well. And I know that you have some experience specifically with LD 609. So I will have you jump right in, and then I'll follow up with some other ways that we keep track of trainings in general, just so that the board members have some understanding of that.
Yeah, sounds good. So I always like to present what my knowledge base is so that when I talk about this stuff, it has a little bit of a point of reference. When I graduated from UMO in 2010 with my master's, I also got my LCPC license under my counselor education degree. I added like the 15 credits and did the internship. So I worked in a clinical setting where crisis situations were almost every day. And then moved to Islesboro, or not moved to Islesboro, but moved there professionally and did some school counseling out there. And it was during that time that I got re-involved or involved again with the Maine School Counselor Association. My first interactions with MESCA was as a student rep. I'd been invited to join as a UMO student rep. And at that time, there was like a lovely woman named Grace Eaton. And she had been on the MESCA board for a really long time. And her son died by suicide not many years before, I feel like. She started working with the state and MESCA to get LD 609 implemented. And so as a student rep, I kind of got to see the ground level work of them advocating for schools to have mandated training around suicide awareness. And then working in schools, I got to see it get rolled out and how NAMI supported that requirement to the state. So LD 609 was created, and I have a really cool link that I'll send you after the fact that shows Grace Eaton speaking on, I think, CNN. The terminology is very outdated in regards to what's appropriate for suicide, but it's just kind of nice to see the woman from Maine whose story kind of got this ball rolling. So NAMI partnered with the state, like they do a lot of the times. They're fabulous, to help provide trainings to the schools. And one of the things that they do are offer gatekeeper, advanced gatekeeper, and trainer of the training trainings. So those are the pretty much like your basic suicide awareness training. So gatekeeper is the requirement you have to take just to kind of start any type of ground level movement in the school. Hopefully people in the school then go and get the trainer of the training, which means you can come back to your district and provide the 90 to 2 hour training from NAMI to your employees. And now this is everyone from janitorial staff to bus drivers. And ideally we have anyone, coaches or whatnot, who are employed by the district get involved in this on some level. I would say that COVID has made it a little bit hard, but Ms. Tribo has done like an incredible job in finding some resources for our district to use to keep carrying on this work. Personally, I've partnered with the Maine MCST, there we go, MCST, to provide this training over there, I believe last year, and I'm going over this Wednesday to do it again as well. So after you get your staff trained and they've had the 1 to 2 hour suicide prevention training, they then should be equipped to identify language or behaviors that could be considered risky behaviors for suicide. In that, we hope that people in the building, and most of the time they do, know who the gatekeepers would be. So the people who took that initial gatekeeper training or the advanced gatekeeper trainings, those students are referred to those people. And then we utilize the Columbia rating scale, which is also presented through NAMI and is a really like clear-cut tool, step by step, that Greg Marley would state any layperson can use walking off the street. After that, it is usually taken to a person with a clinical background who can make an assessment based on what needs to be done. And from there, there's no decision is ever made in isolation in any school. RSU13 really has a team-based approach to everything. And so when a clinical staff has a recommendation in one direction or another, they really work with administration to express what the concerns are and collaborate with the family and work with referrals to outside in the community based on what the needs are. So I have kind of seen it go from wanting to be a requirement to being a requirement to seeing how it has all played out. As a school, we also revisit the paperwork that we've created. Like just today, I tapped in and got to visit my like old world of school counseling and just said, you know, we've used this for a couple of years. What are your thoughts of like our recording paperwork for suicide checks or ideation checks? And they had some great feedback. You know, some of the things they need for elementary are different than some of the things they need for middle. And so we're going to collaborate together to see how we can edit the really cool document that we already have. So nothing in this world ever stays the same. And it's something we constantly check in on and try to improve and make more, I don't want to say efficient, but more effective, I guess. You know, we wouldn't want to lose any substance to what we're doing by trying to be quick, but we want to make sure that it's effective. So that's kind of where we're at. We have a lot of gatekeepers in the district. We have a few people who have done the advanced gatekeeper training along with the trainer of the training. And Stephanie and Greg also linked us up with some more specific trainings to the Columbia rating scale. Those trainings, when we did gatekeeper trainings, were not integrated into the gatekeeper training, but now the Columbia rating scale is put into that first level of training. And then beyond that, there is a specific training for more clinical people in the school can take in regards to the scale and how to use it effectively or how to roll out data. I'm pretty sure it's a pretty full day training, but I haven't taken it. It looks great. Hopefully next year, which would be 2022, which blows my mind. Okay. So those are all my thoughts, lots of them, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have in regards to how we operate as a school in regards to this, or how we react, or procedures we've taken.
Well, this sounds great, and I'm really glad that you are doing this important work in our district. It sounds like you really have a good approach, and it's probably yielding some great results. I guess I'm a little interested in sort of the cause of some of the heightened suicide that we're hearing about in teens and even middle schoolers. And the reading I've done and some of the work I've done as the head of school previously to coming to Maine, there was a pretty direct correlation between, you know, the increased social media usage and increased time online and some of those issues that are just so prevalent in our cultures across the country, across the world, really now. And I'm wondering if there's any work that we can be doing as a district, and excuse me, because I'm a new board member and I just don't know what you've done recently, but I guess I'm wondering if there's anything that we can be doing in the district to sort of help curtail or address those causes or the causality of some of the increased self-harm that we're seeing in the age group that we're serving.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that you have like a really good, so you're looking for right? What we're talking about right now is preventative, and then like the paperwork side of it is a reactive response to what's being said.
Exactly, yes.
So We have, as a district, committed to having SEL on the same level as academics, right? And I love the graphic where in the middle is student growth. I pretty much was like teary-eyed when our district threw that up on the board, like in the auditorium, however many years ago. I was like, yes. So we have been using Second Step at the K-5 level. And I think the root of most online behavior comes from a lack of empathy, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about what the fallout could mean, or thinking about that what you see maybe isn't everything that's going on in someone else's life. So at the K-5 level, you first start with like how to be a learner, right? So K and 1 really focus on focusing your attention, and how do we listen, right? We listen to learn, we listen to ask questions about what we don't understand. Then you roll into calm down strategies. This is all K-5. Coping skills you can do with that. What does your body feel like when you're starting to get upset or a strong emotion? Then you do, I'm trying to think, because I've been at the high school for too long and my brain's flooded. At some point you do like STEP, which is like think of solutions and explore consequences and then pick the plan that makes the most sense. There's another one in there that I'm missing, but that's what they're getting at the K-5 level. And I love it. And there's puppets. And I always like at K-1, there are puppets. And I always say, as much as I hate the puppets, they like love them equally as much as I dislike them or more. And so like I would go in and I'd rock Puppy and Snail and they'd have a great time. In regards to online usage, I know that our technology department does a great job finding resources, and I can't think of the specific program that they use, but I used to partner with Kristen Gould, who has since retired, but we would deliver this online curriculum K-5, you know, like some of it would be like how to compose an email, and another thing, other lessons would be think about what the person sitting on the other side of the screen is thinking, and would really tie in well with our SEL curriculum. So there's a lot of preventative work. Mental health in our area has always been a struggle, just because there's a really high need and a huge lack of resources in terms of referrals and wait times. And we have some really incredible people in the community, and it's just, we need like 50 more incredible people in the community. So we contend with that as well. But those are the preventative things we're doing. And I'm grateful that the district has really made a commitment for, I think, like 10 years with the Second Step program. In there, we've kind of brought it in baby steps in different ways in different schools. And seeing like how you would go full blown Second Step would be like a cool step for me, but they're still kind of learning it and trying to figure out how to get ed techs this training too, because they're present for a lot of the unstructured times during recess and lunch when most of the conflicts occur. So when I was at TGS, I was allowed to have ed tech meetings, and I walked through and trained on Second Step and used language, and they presented scenarios that had occurred. And we would role play how I would use the Second Step language into problem solving or coming to a resolution between two conflicts. So that was an amazing thing that I had been allowed to do at TGS.
And the middle school, I think I'll just tack on to what they start in K-5. The middle school is starting to implement the BAR program, which incorporates the use of something called iTime. And it's not a perfect system yet. This is their first year with it, and they're still working on where does this best fit in the schedule. But the new principal that you met, I think it was 2 board meetings ago, Colden, who presented to the board, and he talked a little bit about his plans with that. He is working on ensuring that that gets into the schedule. And iTime really does focus on some of those SEL, same types of strategies for students. And I think that's even more important for our middle school students who are very influenced by what they see on TikTok, other forms of social media. They are very influenced. And I don't think that last year's hybrid schedule did those students any favors, because on those days when they might not have been as engaged with school, they might have still been very engaged with social media. And so they had a lot of FaceTime, if you will, with this, being inundated with social media. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of what we're battling as well. But I think we've got some good strategies. We just have a lot of things that are sort of new and fresh and still in the works.
At the high school, they've had the bar model for a few years. And so part of that process I can speak to is we have what are called freshman academy and sophomore academy. Our freshman rates for earning credits and following through are incredible. You can look at a lot of these kids' history, and freshman academy was just, they did it and they did good. And sophomore academy is a little bit newer, but it's the same system. So we have all the kids yank their grades on every day that we meet, or within like a week and a half's time span. We review their grades. We talk about their strengths. We talk about what they're struggling with. We talk about what interventions as a staff we can have. And as a team, we farm out all these responsibilities. And so we really are getting to know the whole kid. The strength might be baseball. Can you work in any baseball questions into your lessons, just small things that can really make the difference for some of these individuals. Once freshman and sophomore academies have kind of run out of all their interventions or everything they can do at that baseline, then as a school, we do a risk review, which is myself, Mr. Barkey, Mr. Marshall, Nurse Carter, and the school counselors, Susan Hood and Colin Malone, and our social worker, Hannah Fazy. And then those are really kind of our top tier kids. And we really work hard, whether it's outside referrals or thinking creatively at OHS or looking at different programs we have inside our district to help keep them engaged in their education. So it's really interesting. I'm not sure if it's needed at the junior or senior level year. We do risk reviews on all grade levels, so juniors and seniors, but only the freshmen and sophomores have academies. But it's an incredible process, and not necessarily focused on what needs to get improved solely either. Like you're talking about strengths, and sometimes a kid is a 0 in terms of risk level, but they still were talked about and in sense of their strengths, which is nice. So everyone's getting looked over, not just one specific set of kids.
I had a couple questions, Stephanie and Nicole and John. I just wanted to thank you, first of all, I think I asked this question at the last board meeting, so I didn't expect for it to be addressed so quickly. So thanks for making the space and for sharing the work that you're doing. I really appreciate learning about it and the value that the schools are placing on taking care of our kids. So thank you for that. I had just a couple sort of thoughts / questions. So one that I was thinking about is, I'm thinking about the adults that children end up interacting with frequently, like a coach or a teacher or a bus driver, someone who they're seeing on a daily basis. I'll say from my experience as a teacher, it's sometimes hard to know whether to overreact or underreact. I think that can be really confusing sometimes of I'm seeing something that doesn't seem quite right, and when do I take action? So I'm kind of curious, how you help support adults. I hear about all this training, and I think, and NAMI is a wonderful resource. So I'm not questioning the value of the training, but I think that's the harder piece, I think, is the judgment calls on the one-on-one level. And so I'm curious, how you're supporting, or what the culture is of supporting people in trying to sort through those decisions. And something kind of related to that is, I think it would be my gut that kids who have some kind of trusted adult that they have a good relationship with are probably in a better place when it comes to mental health or suicide, because they have someone who they can approach. And although I hope that students are also getting that at home, I don't think we can assume that. And so one exercise I heard about when I was doing my student teaching that's always stuck with me is that I think it was a school actually in Southern Maine where they
dots next to the names.
Maybe, yeah, I'm not sure. I might not be. It's been like 20 years since I've heard this story, so forgive me. But but I think they tried to take all the students in the school and see which students had strong social connections and which weak. It sounds like you're familiar with this, Nicole, so you may even be able to do justice to it. But but then there were some students who had no real connection with an adult, and that, in a way, those are. So I guess I'm just sort of like putting that forward as that might be an interesting exercise if that's something you don't do. And but I'll just say one more thing, because I think I'm having too many thoughts maybe, but so I'd be sort of curious, Nicole, for you to, you could maybe even tell people about that exercise. And then my third thought / genuine question was just, I know that mental health providers are so booked up right now in the pandemic, like the waiting list, especially in this area, is, I mean, there just aren't available counselors, at least that's what I've heard. And so I guess I'm genuinely curious, do we have enough resources in the school during COVID? This is a very difficult and challenging time for everyone, in terms of social isolation, in terms of the scariness of the pandemic. I'd be curious if you've seen suicidal ideation or attempts going up since the pandemic, and just if do we need more in the schools to connect with every student, which kind of gets back to this idea of trusted adult and students having connections, or are there other things that we could be doing? So sorry for my many questions.
I hear two different kind of questions here. So I want to go back to the first one. So you spoke a lot about how are we supporting people to figure out what in that gray area is or isn't a concern. And so our NAMI training that the people get delivered by the trainer of the trainers is really specific about if something feels off, regardless of what it is, it's worth mentioning. And so it might not be, the kid might always be failing their classes, right? They might always be failing. They might be miserable at school. The change in the behavior might be like they're suddenly happy and chipper and really at peace. So even though it's a positive switch, that is a sign of suicidal ideation and planning, and usually being close to following through on whatever had been planned. There's like a sense of calm over that person who had been experiencing really intense grief or discomfort for a long time. And so we go through many different scenarios. And at the end of the day is, if you are still thinking about it, if something sits wrong, that you're going to reach out to someone else to follow up. Mr. Barkey said something to me that has stuck with me since the beginning of the year, and it's never be the only person to make a decision, and never be the last person to know something. So if something is sitting with you wrong, you definitely would follow up with, a clinical staff or an administrator to get in touch with a clinical person. And this has happened multiple times. I'll get a phone call late in the evening or a text, and I'll make phone calls out to families. And if people aren't present or able to answer the phone, we've partnered up with local law enforcement to do wellness checks out to the homes. So we really do follow through with all of that as much as we're able to with what we're told. And people do really cling on to the concept of, if I am uncomfortable, even though I can't pinpoint what the thing is, I need to reach out. And people do that. The other piece you were talking about is support in our schools. And so I think RSU13 is not much different than any other district in this country or world, maybe at the moment, it feels like, in that there's not enough of anyone to go around. But everyone is working incredibly hard, and none of these things have ever gone unaddressed due to a lack of staff. What we'll do is we'll set aside the tasks that aren't necessary to be completed during the day, and we'll spend our time with the kids. Personally, and I'm not alone, I'm sure John and Stephanie can nod to this as well, but a lot of work is done while I'm watching Netflix. The data I can input or the things I can do from home, I just do from home because our kids come first. So there is just an increase in behavior everywhere. There's an increase in mental health needs everywhere. There's an increase in concern for teacher burnout everywhere. And much like the preventative work we're trying to do with our students, as a district, in many districts, we're doing the reactive work and the preventative work all at once. And so we're all just working super hard to do both sides of it. And how we get to doing just the preventative and there's less reactive is just going to take time. And you have really committed people in the district who are working towards that. I'm not sure if that answers, but that was kind of.
Well, I'll also add that we give an assessment called the PAIR HSA, Holistic Student Assessment, to our 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, 9th graders, and 10th graders. And I believe our 2 schools have administered the fall assessment. It was one of our grant related goals through the Title V federal grant funds last year to see a 50% decrease in students that have tier 3 challenges. We actually didn't end up administering it a second time in the spring because we had those students for so few days. So we didn't see any decrease. And I did take a peek at the middle school just to see if there was any decrease from fall of last year to fall of this year. There has not been a decrease. So the needs are there. The data is telling us that students are experiencing these tier 3 challenges at school. And some of those challenges are not having somebody that they feel like they can talk to, not having that relationship. Some of our students that are in middle school are either new to middle school because they're 6th graders, or they're 7th graders that still feel very new to middle school because of all of the disruptions that they experienced last year.
And that's super familiar at the high school, right? We have almost 2 freshman classes. Our sophomore and our freshman class are brand new and are trying to figure life out. Along with the PAIR survey, I wanted to throw in that I totally cut you off, by the way. Apologies. You're over here, so I don't know who I'm pointing at on y'all's screen, but I'm pointing to Stephanie on mine. We did administer the MIHAS, which is the main integrated youth health survey. They haven't been able to do that, I think, in a number of years. I remember taking it in high school, but that gives us a lot of good information on drug and alcohol use and mental health and suicidal thoughts and ideation and data. And, kids are not required to take it, but we provided time during advisory to partake in it, and a majority of our students did. So it will take a while to compile that data, but I think it will be useful or at least informative to see what our kids are really struggling with when that comes back.
I have a question, Nicole, and that is in regards to what kind of help we're giving parents and how much, I don't want to use the word training because that sounds so formal, but how much are we making sure that they are involved in particular looking at dangerous language and cues that they might pick up at home that even before they get to us, and we're looking at those in school. Maybe you can speak to that.
So we don't provide a training specifically for parents. I suppose if the district wanted to, I could certainly do one of the trainings and make it available to parents if there were interest in that. To be honest, Carol, like we offer things to families, and involvement can be hit or miss. That includes like phone calls home or emails returned or Zoom meetings attended. And I can talk at a couple different degrees. So our interventions start with elementary students. When a kid is frustrated with, I always use math as an example because that was like my anxiety spot, like it still gives me the heebie-jeebies. Some kids will get really frustrated with an assignment or math or writing, and they'll say like, oh, I'm just going to kill myself. Well, that statement in turn they have to meet with somebody to evaluate thoughts and ideation on plans. And most of the time they'll just say, I was just mad. But interventions really start at that K-5 level where school counselors or social workers are calling home. And in those conversations, we're asking them to redirect language at home. We're giving them opportunities to express what their frustrations are. We're offering supports through second step, like what are our program that we're using and how can they utilize that language in their home. More so than that, when we have kids that have these specific concerns, whether it's just behavioral or even academic at the K-5 level, like we have the academies or the risk review meetings up here or parent teacher meetings, they have student intervention teams at all K-5. So we invite the parents in. Typically it's been over Zoom, the past couple years, but we can really get together and again, approach the whole child. What are they dealing with at home? What are behaviors you're seeing at home? How can we support the language you're using and how can you support the language we're using? Because we're not these kids' parents, but I always say it to the teachers, like, yes, we're a teaching team, but we co-parent these kids. And we know that co-parenting is successful when we're all on the same page. And I just kind of put it at that, like we're all trying to raise healthy, well-balanced community members that can contribute and give back and be good citizens later on. So how can we do that together? I know the same happens at the middle school. They have team meetings and phone calls are made home like pretty frequently. Specific trainings to teach adults in our district have not been made, but NAMI's trainings are open to the public. Anybody can take those. And so we could certainly, which is a great idea, put them out probably in some form of notification when those trainings come back up for next year, that if there was anyone in our community who was interested, that they could take X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, including board members. I'm thinking maybe we pull this discussion forward to a workshop, and I'll put that in Lauren's head. See what happens.
And I
Like,
believe
that's a great idea. Yeah, sorry, Stephanie.
I
didn't
think
mean to interrupt you.
last year, I don't know what the attendance level for this was, but Ilmi Carter, our school nurse, had attended a nursing conference and got a free screening for, and it was a community screening for a showing of a film called Screenagers. And there were actually two I think there was like Screenagers 1 and Screenagers 2. And it really was specifically about what you were mentioning, Brad, about students being really affected by the use of technology. And I mean, a huge part of that was social media, but also how that affects their mental health. And so I'm pretty sure, I know that we went through the process of, what's it going to take for us to do a screening of this? And it was a virtual screening because we couldn't have people in person last year. But I'll have to loop back with Ilmi and see if that was well attended. I think it was a Wednesday evening in March that they offered that screening.
Yeah, I've done similar things in previous schools where we've done that type of screening and then a panel discussion afterward.
Yes, yeah.
And it's been effective in terms of parent education. Of course, attendance is always a question, but if there was a time that we could do that or somehow really publicize it in a way that would attract a bunch of parents to attend, that's at least the beginning of a dialogue. The other thing that we did, we had policies or recommendations that said, hey, we should really limit the amount of screen time, or you should really be aware of what your tween or your teenager is doing at home. And some parents will take it to heart and do it, and maybe most won't, but at least it's a start. And if you can get some nucleus of a parent community that understands the issues and then is educated about the issues and can talk to their peer parents, that might actually create a more healthy culture for the students in our district as well. I mean, there are a lot of other ideas we could brainstorm, but I just think that there's that two-pronged approach of reactive and then preventative, and I think it's important to also give most often I see schools just do the reactive and not enough preventative, and I'd like to just make sure that ratio is the right ratio for our students.
There's I should write down the things that I do because you just brought up in my mind last year, Camden, Rockland, Oceanside, and I don't know if it was Madomic or there were a couple of high schools, and we all partnered with Greg Marley. So I just chimed in, having an interest at the high school level. Jesse invited me up to help put together a presentation for the community. It was coping with COVID in it might have been 2021 at the time. And really parents came and had like an open forum. We had like 50 people. We invited community providers to share the resources that were available to families and students. And there were a lot of great ideas that were batted around there that people were able to take and walk away from and utilize if they'd wanted. But it's all coming back. I feel like 1 year ends and I'm just kind of like, whew.
Do we have little pamphlets at the high school that kids can just kind of anonymously scoop up regarding, like, if you're feeling this way?
Well, there's like a concern with doing anything anonymously because tracking and timeliness of the reports can be incredibly difficult. So most of the time, even if the person can come to me or until my school counseling certification is, I should probably renew that, but I have a few more years on it. You know, they come to Mr. Malone, they can come to really any adult in the building and disclose any sort of information.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. What I'm asking is, you know, you see various places around in the communities where there's a little pamphlet about here are the resources you can do, here are the questions to ask yourself. You know, am I feeling blue most of the time, some of the time, never? Just to get the students themselves to do a kind of a self-check and see, is it time for me to go talk to somebody?
Oh, like a rating scale.
Either that or just an little informative booklet, pamphlet, you know, a trifold or something where they, you know, which would include the suicide hotline numbers and stuff like that.
We've got suicide hotline numbers. Oh, well, it's one on my board. I tried to rip it off all over the place. They're on every billboard. They're in bathrooms. They are, when I meet with students, I have them put it right into their phone. I actually think it's something we could probably have every student do at the start of a school year, an advisory, just so that they have that. Students are much more adept at getting resources. Like most of them know like what apps they can download that they could reach out to national chat hotlines versus just local places. But yeah, we have that information all over the place, although we don't provide like a rating scale. Typically, if people are looking at that and taking note of the number, they're pretty aware on some level. I would be concerned with providing a most of the time, those rating scales, at least for children, are provided at pediatrician visits, like wellness checkups, or if you're going for anxiety or something. And if we were giving that resource to kids, I would want to make sure that we knew they had it and would be following up on some level so that if something did come up as a result of what we provided, we were able to follow through and give appropriate referrals or support. And we do have one for the suicide, like we have the Columbia rating scale. But on the other side of it, like if someone's saying they're anxious or they're depressed, school counselors and school social workers can provide short-term counseling. And then we work with community resources for referrals. And we have, we're not like being like, hey, our 6 week is up, we're done. We will extend until appropriate resources can be found to outside places to not leave people hanging. But we don't diagnose in school. Like even if I had my LCPC license, I wouldn't operate under it inside the school. I would send out for a diagnosis.
Right, of course.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have Nicole come and provide an overview, Kiara, was partly because you had mentioned an interest in wanting to find out more. Mental health is really important. It's an important topic anyways, but I think now more than ever. And also, I just wanted to share our process around required training. So the training for LD 609 is a required training for all of our staff. For every required training that's required for all staff, we also have the flip side of how do you manage that? Because bus drivers aren't going to be available at the same time as other staff might be. And then how do you include coaches? And so the logistics of training can get really complicated really fast. But we are very fortunate to have a platform called Target Solutions. It's not always the best solution for every type of training. And I'll mention sort of a segue back to suicide prevention and awareness training in just a minute. But Target Solutions is a platform that our staff can get to on our website. They have a login for it, and it keeps track of all of the trainings that they complete. We try to put as many trainings that are web-based in there as possible so that they can do them asynchronously at any time that's most convenient for them. So for example, we have harassment training is required for every new staff member, and every staff member has to complete that training either upon hire or at least one time. We have cyberbullying training and school bullying training. Those are two separate trainings that are required every year by all of our staff members. Those three trainings right there are available in Target Solutions. They have a video that goes along with them. I think they each have a couple of questions within the videos that staff answer as they work through those videos, and then they check a box that states that they've finished their quiz. They get a score on that quiz, and then they get a certificate that they can use for continuing contact hours. Most of those trainings are shorter. They might be anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes, so they can get half an hour of contact hours for each one that they complete. And we do have other trainings in there. We did trauma-informed training at the beginning of last year, Nicole, that I think you helped us organize with Dr. Cassie Yackley. So that was in there as well, because it was really challenging to get all staff together. So she was kind enough to offer a recording, and then another one of our school counselors, Monica, walked through some preparatory slideshow information. I think I did one on curriculum, how to prioritize your curriculum in COVID. So it's a great way to deliver trainings, and we're now working on one for restraint and seclusion, which the board has been talking about, the restraint and seclusion policy, so that we can provide a video overview of what the changes to the law are and what the paperwork process is in terms of reporting, and then making sure that our administrators have an opportunity for staff to ask follow-up questions at a staff meeting, because that's the downside of the trainings. There's no place to ask questions. So our LD 609 suicide prevention and awareness training, we had a lot of our staff that were going to be expiring in that training because it's required every 6 years, right around the spring of 2020 into the 2020-2021 school year. So a lot of our staff completed that training online and watched the webinar, and there was a piece of reading that they were required to do, but there wasn't really an opportunity to have any in-person dialogue or conversation. And I think that really is the intention behind the training. So the web version is a great backup, especially for the staff that are really hard to be able to pull into a training. But we do want to make sure that we're offering opportunities, and any of our staff who have done the training of the trainer training, I guess, is they're able to offer that in person. So Nicole, I know you mentioned that you're doing that at Midcoast School of Technology. I believe some of our new staff at the high school are going to follow you over there and get that training in person as well. Yeah. So that will be wonderful. So Target Solutions is a great solution for training, but we also recognize it's not the end all be all and the only way to deliver trainings.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could even, you anticipated my question, and it sounds like you're all over it. I wonder if, particularly with some of the mental health, suicide awareness trainings, maybe people could even just talk in departments and small groups or something if you're not able to, actually that might be better anyway, because I don't know if people would feel as comfortable asking those questions in a big forum.
The suicide awareness training really isn't meant to be delivered in like a group of 200 people. Right. And when we do those small group check-ins, whether it's by department or grade level or whatnot, like however the district decides to do that, it should be small group, and it needs to be facilitated by someone who has a clinical background or experience in this type of crisis intervention work. So luckily, like I said, as a district, like or at least as a clinical person in the district, we've always been supported and given an opportunity to do this stuff. I know over COVID, like we were granted time to meet with Greg Marley to pivot, like how do we deal with suicidal ideation when we are on the opposite side of a Zoom screen or on a phone call, or, and so we really pivoted and created a plan and procedure with Greg Marley to like help out with that. And this small group idea in terms of check-ins is just like another cool thing that has come from COVID. Not much cool has come from COVID, but I will take that, we've had to think outside the box and come up with a different routes to things. And I think small groups by department or something like that would be awesome to follow up on that training online.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing with us, and you being in the schools, you have a much deeper look at what's happening. So I really appreciate that.
Same to you guys. I appreciate John and Stephanie letting me come, and I appreciate the board having an interest, and feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions after the fact. It's nhatch@RSU13. But again, like super appreciative of your work and your willingness to hear us out. So it's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you guys soon. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you,
so much.
Nicole.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
The other thing I had on the agenda is more curriculum related. This is the other joy of COVID. Actually, there's no joy about this. COVID is becoming the big change. It's the big opportunity for companies and departments of education and lots of other organizations to make change. So Department of Ed has changed assessments, which you are probably aware, but if not, we've moved our new MEA is now our NWEA assessment, which we now give in the fall. It's also required in the spring. We were doing that anyways as a district, thank goodness, but not all districts across the state were. So that is new to some districts. Our grant system that we use for all of our federal funding has changed as well. So that's something that we've been learning. And then our companies that we partner with have been letting us know that they are also making changes to the curriculum. And some of these are curriculum materials that we have purchased. Reading Street, which we purchased about 4.5 years ago, notified us that they are no longer making the texts. So we were notified of that at the beginning of the summer. So if we needed any additional texts to purchase, which I don't think we did, I think we were pretty, in terms of our enrollment numbers, I think we had the text that we needed to cover all of the students in our district. But licensing going forward, they will honor our contract, which ends in the year 2023. So that's not that far from now. But after that, we will no longer be able to even use the online resources, and our contract will be ended by that point, but there will be no opportunity to renew. So we're in discussions right now with our K-5 principal team about what we want to take in terms of next steps for materials and curriculum planning for English language arts. And part of that conversation is really around two things. One of them is the foundational reading skills for students, particularly students in grades K through 2. Really want to ensure that they start off with a strong foundation in phonics and reading approaches. And then the second piece of that is we're noticing with our new math program, the iReady data that I talked about with this group last time is wonderful. And iReady does have a literacy assessment as well. So we're going to start by looking in, well, we're going to start with what do we really need, and thinking about what we want to look for in terms of programming. But we also want to make sure that we're choosing programming that will provide us with actionable data and hopefully supportive resources as well, because we're finding that that approach in math is incredibly helpful. And I think after the last time that I presented to you, I presented to our ed techs, our Title I teachers and our special education teachers about how they can go in and access supportive materials for students that they might be working with in small groups or one-on-one. And that went really well. So I'm excited about that. And I'm hopeful that we can find some resources that will be resources and assessments that will have the same effect on literacy as what we're seeing on math. So that's on the horizon, and it's on the more immediate horizon than I would have expected. And the other piece that's on the horizon, which is more immediate than I would have expected, although I had a little bit of a heads up, our 6 through 8 math program called Go Math is also making some changes, and they will honor our contract, but our contract ends this summer in 2022. Now, initially, I think we've only had this contract for 5 years. I wouldn't make a big switch within 5 years, just like with Reading Street. I wouldn't normally just say, oh, we're going to change things every 5 years, because that's not really enough for people to even get used to using the materials. However, given that our contract is sunsetting with the Go Math program, we are going to explore other possibilities. I have met with the company. They can extend our Go Math licensing with the upgrade for either 1 year or 3 years. They do have another program, which is why the Go Math is sunsetting. It's called Into Math. But I also think that this gives us an opportunity to explore other programs that might have some of those look-fors in the same way that we were searching for a program in K-5. And looking at how do we make sure that this foundation that we're setting in K-5 is going to extend as students get into middle school and then eventually high school math. But those are two pretty big curriculums that are right on the horizon. And usually what I like to do is have a full year to research with a team, and then have a year to pilot, and then have an implementation year. I don't think we're going to have that time in terms of math. So we're really going to need to consolidate this process with maybe a couple of months to research. And I think as we get a little bit further down the road, I'll present to you guys again with sort of a short-term plan and a long-term plan with how we might best approach that, because it might be that we just simply need more time. So we'll put a short-term plan in place and then work on that longer-term plan. But I won't know until I have an opportunity to meet with the principal and meet with the Oceanside Middle School team and talk about what our best next steps are. So those are two big things on the horizon.
Pretty big.
Pretty big, yes. So I'm curious too, if we can just spend a few minutes, I will certainly provide updates on those two big pieces throughout the year, but I'm wondering if there's other topics too that you'd like to make sure that we're covering as we look at the whole year.
Yeah, I had one thought, and I don't know if this is helpful or maybe going down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go down, but I was speaking with Jesse about the upcoming NEASC accreditation that you have planned, and I'm wondering if there are things that we might be able to do as a committee to help prepare for that. And when I say prepare, not necessarily just get the reaccreditation, which I'm sure the high school will get, but also make the most of the accreditation process. And I don't know if that's by looking at the curriculum or in particular, potentially documenting impacts of the curriculum for the visiting team to get a sense of how the curriculum is functioning within the school, and you know what sort of changes or what sort of evolutions we want to make as we progress along that continuum of teaching and learning that, you know, I'm sure you are working with your principals and your other teachers on.
Okay, great. We'll definitely add that to the list. Other topics?
I don't know how, sorry, I don't know how exactly you would do this, so I might need a little help with that part, but it'd be interesting to be able to understand the arc of learning that happens like in the elementary school curriculum, in the middle school curriculum, and the high school curriculum. But that feels really big to me when I say that out loud, like, because what subject, like, you know, and so I'm not sure if that's even possible, but it'd be kind of interesting to I think for us and for the community, the community who might be watching these, to just see like, how are we, what are the sort of big picture learning goals that we have at each developmental level, like each school level, and how is our curriculum structured around that? And but that may be too big to take on.
Well, actually, that's a good suggestion. And Brad, I know we have a meeting later this week, and I wanted to walk you through it's called the CARE website. It's Curriculum Assessment, Instruction, and Resources for Education. And it's the website that I put together in my role of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction Director. And I think that would be time really well used, since we have several new members of this committee, just to go over what's on that site, how was it created, because the teachers really helped to create all of our learning statements, which is really exciting work. I think it's created a lot of ownership. And when I talk with teachers, especially ones at the K-5 level who have their ICANN statements are complete and their rubrics are complete, doesn't mean that they don't need revision and to be looked at again in the future, because like Nicole said, everything sort of shifts and changes over time. But when they talk about their instruction, they say, I want to make sure that the kids are meeting their ICANN statements, and this is what we're doing. And they really have a lot of ownership over that language, because they're the ones that created it. And I love that work. That was probably the shining light of the past 5 years. Nothing COVID related has been that shining light, but that work that we did when we pulled teachers out and we developed our ICANN statements and developed the rubrics, it was really exciting work. So I would love to take some time at maybe even our next meeting to talk about that with this group. I think that would be great.
And anyone who wants to join me, Stephanie, on Thursday at noon, you're welcome.
Yeah, definitely. Brad, maybe we should record it.
I've been thinking for a long time, Stephanie, one of the areas we absolutely never talk about is social studies. We talk about English language arts and math all over the place, but we do not talk about social sciences. And I would like to have insight into what we're doing, what we might be looking at, texts that we're using. I mean, I think about it around this time of year when we're coming up on Thanksgiving, and I see a plethora of fake Indian headdresses and the whole Pilgrim Thanksgiving narrative. And I wonder about, are we still going down that path, and what else are we doing in terms of social studies, and what kids know about the history of this country and how we're approaching that. So I would, give 2 hand raises to looking at the social studies programs.
Okay. So maybe next time I'll plan to do sort of a broader overview of the website and what's available through that website. I'll take a little bit of time to focus a little bit more specifically on social studies. And there is a scope and sequence of skills that you can see for each of the content areas, and I'll show you how and where you can access that as well. And then I like that idea too about NEASC. And I think as they get started with that process, I'm sure Jesse would be happy to come to one of our meetings and share as well. One of the things we've talked about with NEASC is really making sure that we're using that as an opportunity to think about our school-based objectives. So we have our district level goals and objectives, and each school is working toward one or a small number of those objectives. And this is a great opportunity for the high school to really mesh that district level work with what they need to do for NEASC. And Jesse and I have had the conversation of COVID has put a lot of stuff on the back burner. And I think our work toward our objectives has been put on the back burner. We had a lot of momentum probably 2 years ago, and it doesn't feel like we have that same momentum. We had that excitement this summer, and then the fall happened. And I think one of the conversations that we've had as administrators is this is why we're in education. This is why we're doing what we're doing. It's to meet these district goals. These are important. The proficiencies, the pathways, and the relationships are why we're doing what we're doing. So we have to make sure that we're making time for this. And Jesse and I have talked about how NEASC is a really great opportunity to sort of reignite that work at the high school. So I agree. Great. Well, I think this is wonderful. Carol, I think this gives you and I some direction for planning for some of our future meetings.
And we should talk about when we're going to meet next too, because coming into December, we're heading into, December starts on a Wednesday. So if we're looking at Mondays, we've got the 6th, 13, 20, and 27. And so what are we thinking in terms of, people are going to be pretty Christmas, New Year oriented on the 27th for sure.
Do we want to do the third Monday, the 20th?
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that would probably be good. I mean, the holiday times are just jammed anyway, but we still need to meet, and there are still things we need to talk about, so.
Well, I think Monday, the 20th would be great. And I know that we've talked about doing a board workshop sort of around the district goals and vision. And this might be a good deeper dive into the curriculum and proficiencies piece of that. And that way, if people are interested, they can join this meeting or they can watch the video from it just to get a little bit more information, especially the new board members. Might be a good meeting to invite the new board members too.
I think.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
so. So shall we just nail that down? We're just going to go with the 20th.
We'll do the 20th from 3. We'll plan for 3 to 4.
Okay. Thanks everybody for being here and being active in the conversation, and Bruce lurking in the background. It's always good to have you lurking.
Bruce, I
Carol,
got
I'm
the
not
next
sure
week
if
too.
Kiara heard that the meeting is on the 20th.
that,
You may wanna just-
Stephanie?
I'll send her an email.
Okay,
I'll send her an email.
okay.
What did you say?
I said, Bruce, I got the next meeting topic covered too.
Qué bueno.
Awesome.
John, do
right.
you have anything for us?
I have 2 real quick things. I was going to jump in during the conversation, but I couldn't quite find the right place to get in there. I think it would be really great to try to figure out some kind of a way to give our parent community an overview of the curriculum, simply because I think there's so many assumptions out there about what schools teach and don't teach. We don't teach fiscal literacy. But we do. Financial literacy, I meant to say, but we do. We teach critical race theory, but we don't. I mean, there are all these assumptions out there, and I think that would be a good thing. The second thing that parents I know don't understand is the testing. So there's a huge difference between the old MEA, which is a criterion reference test, and the NWEA, which is nationally normed. And the types of information those 2 tests produce are different. So, I think those are 2 things that are sort of the great mystery to parents. Like, why do you test, and what's this test, and what's the curriculum? What's actually the curriculum? And unless you're a person that likes to dig and ask questions, there's not an obvious answer to that. So I think those are good discussions.
Yeah, good point, John. I know those are the things I get asked as a board member. Those are the big questions.
Is there ever an opportunity to do a curriculum night for parents? I know that's difficult with COVID, but and I'm just wondering, in some other school settings, they do have a night where parents can go 20 minutes, 10 minutes in each class and hear what the teacher's presenting that year and ask questions.
Back to school night.
We used to do things like that all the time before COVID. So in fact, Stephanie had tables set up during parent-teacher conferences with that very thing, and testing too at one point. So it'd be nice to get back to that. I think in lieu of that, maybe there are some things that we could do. Maybe we could do like a video or something. I don't know, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to consider. How do we get that information out there?
It may be possible to do it virtually.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would take a lot of coordination and logistics in terms of sending out the right links and the schedule and everything. But
Like a
I think that the
webinar.
payoff is that you get the parents to be able to at least hear from the teachers and hear what they're teaching, and maybe to have the principal say an introductory welcome. And I mean, it could be a good feel good event, and it could provide a nice bridge between the learning that takes place at school and some of the learning that's happening at home.
Yeah, it's definitely worth discussing. That's for sure. Thank you.
Let's keep that on the simmer burner. Not the back one, the simmer one.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're a little bit out of time by a few minutes. So I thank you, Stephanie, for your great work always, and Bruce's work lurking in the background. And we'll see you all on the 20th at 3.
All right. Sounds great.
And
Thank-
happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes, you as
Thank you.
well.
See ya.